Can you even imagine a wine just like exploding onto the scene? Instant legend status.
Yeah.
Then it survives a shipwreck, seriously. And now, well, now it costs over $800 a bottle on average.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, we're diving into Pingus today. Let's just get right into what makes this wine so incredibly special.
It really is remarkable. Dominio de Pingus, right? From Spain's Ribera del Duero. Founded only in 1995, which isn't that long ago in wine terms.
Not at all.
And it didn't just become iconic, it fundamentally shifted how people saw top-tier Spanish wine.
Exactly. Pingus. It's this small, almost mythical name now. And for this deep dive, we've pulled together a pretty comprehensive report. We're looking at info from the winery itself, importers, plus, the big critics, the wine advocate, wine spectator, James Suckling, and we've got historical background, market stuff too.
Right. A lot to draw on.
So the mission here, for you listening, is to really get the key pieces. The story, the guy behind it, Peter Sisseck, the unique land, how it's actually made, and all that critical buzz. Basically, we want to give you the shortcut to really understanding Pingus.
Sounds like a plan. So 1995, where do we start? How did this whole thing even begin?
Yeah, take us back. What was the spark in 95?
Okay, so the central figure is Peter Sisseck. He's Danish, an equenologist. He actually first went to Ribera del Duero in 93 to run Hacienda Monasterio, another estate.
Okay.
But while he was there, he got fascinated by these old Tempranillo vines in the region. He saw this untapped potential. So Pingus, his own thing, it almost started like a side project. He found these older, maybe slightly neglected vineyard plots over in Lahore.
Ah, interesting. Like a personal discovery.
Totally. And the name Pingus, that was apparently his childhood nickname. So right away, it had this personal angle.
Huh. I didn't know that. And the first vintage, it was a really small amount, wasn't it?
Oh, tiny. Like maybe 325 cases for that first 1995 vintage. But it wasn't about the volume, was it? It was the sheer quality that just immediately turned heads.
And that's where Robert Parker comes in. His early review is just crucial, right, for that initial explosion.
Absolutely pivotal. Utterly. It was at a Bordeaux tasting, an en primeur tasting in spring 96. Parker basically announced the 95 Pingus on the back cover of the Wine Advocate.
Wow.
Gave it this potential score of 96 to 100 points. Unheard of for a brand new Spanish wine back then.
Oh, yeah.
He called it, I think the quote was, one of the greatest and most exciting wines I have ever tasted.
Just like that.
Just like that. Instant cult status. The buzz was immediate.
Talk about bursting onto the scene.
Yeah.
And then, not long after, the shipwreck story. That sounds almost made up.
It really does, doesn't it? So in 1997, a ship heading to the U.S. went down. And on board, just 75 cases of Pingus.
Only 75 cases.
Yeah. Now, obviously terrible for the people expecting it, but for the wine's reputation, it just added fuel to the fire. You had Parker's praise, tiny production, and now this dramatic event. The mystique just ballooned. Prices basically doubled overnight.
Doubled. Just from that.
Yep, from around $200 to almost $500, pretty much instantly. And like you said, it's kept climbing, now over $800 average.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So that initial hype definitely wasn't just hype. It had substance.
Yep.
What about the other wines? I know there's Florida Pingus, maybe others.
Yeah, exactly. As the legend grew, people wanted more. So Florida Pingus came along. It's often called the second wine. Different old vine plots, but still that Sisseck touch.
Right.
Then in 2003, something even rarer appeared. Amelia. Just one barrel. Literally one barrel from vines over 100 years old.
One barrel.
Microscopic production. And then later, around 2006, he started the PSI project. That's more of a collaboration with local growers using their old vines. A bit more accessible, but, the main event, the flagship.
Mm-hmm.
That's still Pingus, the original.
It always comes back to the original.
Yeah.
To Peter Sisseck himself, he sounds like quite the character. Danish, worked in Bordeaux, then Ribera. What's his driving philosophy? What's he really aiming for?
Well, his core idea seems to be pushing Tempranillo, the local grape, to its absolute limit in terms of quality, but doing it while respecting the traditions of the place. He saw the potential in those old, maybe forgotten bush vines, and he wasn't afraid of hard work in the vineyard. I mean, really meticulous work, severe pruning, training the vines, sometimes cutting them back to just one or two buds.
Just one or two? Why so drastic?
To slash the yields dramatically. Get incredible concentration in the few grapes that remain.
Yeah.
We're talking yields way, way below average, sometimes under 1 ton per acre. It's tiny.
That's intense. Quality over quantity, clearly. And I hear he's big on natural farming.
Oh, absolutely. He's known for saying his best old vines, they've never been fertilized nor treated with pesticides. They're grown in vaso, like little freestanding bushes, the old way.
Right.
He genuinely believes these old vines are kind of naturally perfect and need very little messing with. That belief led him towards organic and then biodynamic farming. Starting around 2000, he even got the Demeter certification.
So biodynamics,
Yeah.
that involves focusing on soil health, natural preparations, that sort of thing.
Exactly. It's a whole system. Thinking about the vineyard as a living organism, using natural composts, herbal treatments, sometimes even working with lunar cycles. It's very holistic.
And does that philosophy carry through into the winery itself?
Definitely. The word that comes up is minimalist. No added stuff, no harsh techniques. Pingus isn't fine or filtered before bottling.
What about racking? Moving the wine off its sediment.
Kept to a minimum, let it clarify naturally. And crucially, he destems all the grapes, takes them off the stems before fermentation. That's for fruit purity, smoother tannins,
Right.
and maybe the ultimate sign of his commitment. He won't release Pingus in a vintage if he thinks the quality isn't absolutely top-notch. He skipped vintages. That tells you everything about his standard.
Wow, yeah. Not many producers would do that, especially with such high demand. A real quality absolutist, as some describe him.
That sums it up pretty well.
Okay, so we have the visionary, the meticulous approach. Let's talk about the place itself, the terroir. Where exactly are these magic vineyards?
So, the winery itself is in Quintanilla de Onésimo. But the key vineyards, the crown jewels for Pingus, they're in the La Jora area. That's in the eastern part of Ribera del Duero, and it's known for being higher up.
Higher elevation.
How high are we talking?
Pretty high for Ribera, between about 800 and 900 meters. That's up on the main plateau of Castilla y Leon.
And that altitude, that makes a big difference to the grapes, doesn't it?
No, fundamentally, it creates this specific continental climate. You get really hot summer days, which ripens the grapes fully. But crucially, the nights get properly cool.
That temperature swing, the diurnal rain.
Exactly. That big swing helps the grapes hang on to their natural acidity. It stops them from getting flabby, and it helps develop more complex aromas and flavors. It's key for balance and freshness.
So ripe fruit, but with that backbone of acidity. Best of both worlds. What about the ground itself? The soil? Also really important. The soils in his key plots are rich in limestone, mixed with clay and some gravel. Calcareous soils like that are prized. They tend to give wines good structure, finesse, a sort of mineral edge, and they help shape the tannins, make them fine-grained, elegant, adds complexity.
And those specific plots, Barroso and San Cristobal, they sound legendary.
They kind of are in the Pingus story. They were planted way back in 1929, mostly Tempranillo, or Tinto Fino as they call it there.
1929, so really old vines.
Seriously old, over 90 years old now. There are only about 4 hectares total between those two main sites. And because they're so old and farmed for such low yields, they produce very little fruit. But the flavor concentration in those grapes, it's just immense. Some of the most treasured old vines in the whole region.
And all dry farmed, biodynamically managed since 2000, you said?
Correct. Dry farmed, so no irrigation, relying on natural rainfall. And fully biodynamic since about 2000, using those organic composts, herbal teas, working with natural rhythms. Plus, the climate there is pretty arid and windy.
Which helps with...
Less disease pressure, fewer problems with mold or rot. It actually makes practicing organic and biodynamic farming a bit easier, or at least more naturally suited to the place.
Got it. And harvest, I assume, is all done by hand?
Oh, yeah. Meticulously. Hand harvested, then sorted very carefully, probably berry by berry back at the winery. Only the absolute best makes the cut for Pingus.
It really sounds like this perfect storm of factors. Ancient vines, high altitude, specific soils, and just incredibly dedicated, almost obsessive farming.
That's a good way to put it. A convergence.
Okay, so they get this incredible fruit into the winery. How does Sisseck turn that into the finished wine? What's the cellar philosophy?
Well, echoing the vineyard, it's about measured simplicity. The goal isn't to impose a heavy winemaker signature, but to let that amazing fruit and the terroir speak as clearly as possible.
Makes sense.
So fermentation usually happens in large wooden vats or maybe open-top oak fermenters. He seems to prefer wood over stainless steel right from the start. Believes it gives a gentler integration, maybe helps manage the tannins.
And using native yeasts from the grapes themselves.
Yes, relying on the yeasts naturally present on the grape skins. Temperature control is key, of course, during fermentation and maceration, to extract the right amount of color and flavor without getting harshness. Maybe slightly cooler temperatures recently compared to the early days?
Okay, And then the aging, the élevage, that's evolved a bit over time, hasn't it? Especially
Yeah.
the use of new oak barrels.
It really has. Historically, Pingus would spend around 18 months or so in French oak barrique, the standard small barrels. And yeah, a pretty high percentage of those be brand new.
Which can sometimes dominate a wine.
It can, but Pingus always had this incredible concentration, this density from the old vines and low yields that it just seemed to absorb the new oak really well. It was powerful, but the oak felt integrated.
Right, but that's changed recently.
Yes, starting around the 2018 vintage, he began to dial back the new oak percentage. He started using larger oak vessels too, like big 20,000-liter casks. The idea is to bring out more finesse, more freshness, maybe let the fruit character be even purer.
Less overt oak influence.
Exactly. And apparently the 2022 vintage was aged with no new oak at all. That's quite a statement. A real shift towards transparency.
That is a significant change. What about other things during aging? Fining, filtration.
Still minimal intervention. No fining, no filtering before bottling. Racking is minimized, letting the wine evolve and clarify gently on its own. And remember the 100% destemming. That also contributes to the texture, aiming for those plush, smooth tannins.
So putting it all together, what's the resulting style? If you had a glass of Pingus, what would you expect?
It's consistently described as this amazing blend of power and elegance. You get intense concentration, full body, deep color, all thanks to those old vines and low yields. But crucially, it's not heavy or clumsy or overripe.
There's a balance.
A remarkable balance. Harmony, vibrancy, lift. Even with all that concentration, it handles the oak gracefully, especially now with the move to less new oak. And as it ages, people talk about it developing an almost Burgundian finesse, which is pretty special for Ribera del Duero Tempranillo.
Burgundian finesse, that's high praise. It is. And Sisseck himself has subtly tweaked things over the years, maybe kicking a bit earlier in hot years, gentler handling of the grapes, always refining, trying to enhance that detail and depth without losing the power. That description of the 2018 as subtle and harmonious, elegant and insinuating, precise and pure, really nails that evolved style.
Sounds like a constant quest for refinement. Let's talk scarcity again. It's clearly a huge part of the Pingus aura. What are the actual production numbers nowadays?
Still incredibly small. From those 4-ish hectares of core vineyards, the average annual production of Pingus itself is typically fewer than 500 cases.
500 cases for the whole world.
Pretty much. Maybe 6,000 bottles max, often closer to 3,000 or 4,000. And in tough years, it can be even less. Or, as we said, none at all if the quality isn't there in Sisseck's eyes.
That tiny volume obviously fuels the demand, the price.
Absolutely. It's inherent scarcity baked into the process of making it at that quality level from those specific old vines.
And how does that compare to, say, Florida Pingus or the Amelia?
Florida Pingus has a bit more volume, maybe around 4,000 cases. It comes from other old vine plots in La Jora, also farmed biodynamically, usually sees a bit less new oak. It's designed to be, well, slightly more available, a bit more approachable, perhaps.
Still not exactly mass market, though.
Oh, definitely not. And then Amelia. That's the extreme end, that single barrel cuvee. We're talking maybe 25 cases, 25. It's almost impossibly rare. The ultimate expression of concentration from those specific century-old vines.
Wow. And the PSI project.
That's different again. It's a larger scale project, a collaboration using grapes from local growers' old vines, not made at the Pingus winery itself. It reflects Sisseck's wider interest in preserving the region's old vine heritage.
So while they all share some DNA old vines, Tempranillo-focused, careful winemaking Pingus is still the absolute pinnacle, the handcrafted heart of it all.
Exactly. It remains the benchmark, the jewel in the crown, made in these tiny, tiny quantities.
Okay, so scarcity is key. Now the critical acclaim. Seems like critics have loved Pingus from day one.
Pretty much. The praise has been immediate and incredibly consistent. We already talked about Robert Parker's bombshell review of the 95. That 98-point score wasn't just high, it was revolutionary for Spain at the time. It put Ribera del Duero on the map for collectors globally.
A game changer.
Totally. It basically said, hey, Spain can make wines that belong in the same conversation as the best of Bordeaux or California, and the accolades kept coming. The 2004 vintage hitting a perfect 100 points from the Wine Advocate. That was huge. A historic moment for Spanish wine.
What did they say about that 2004?
J. Mello reviewed it. He called it complete, harmonious, no rough edges, praised the incredible density, the amazing aromatics, the seamless texture, and predicted it would age for decades.
A perfect score is the absolute peak, isn't it? And it wasn't just a one-off for Pingus.
Remarkably, no. Several other vintages have also received 100 points from the Wine Advocate. Let me see. 2012, 2014, 2016, 2018, and apparently the 2021 as well.
That's incredible consistency at the very top level.
It's exceptionally rare for any wine, anywhere. And it's not just one publication. Wine Spectator consistently gives it scores in the mid to high 90s. They praise the 2020 for its freshness and length, its effortless grace. They've called Sisseck's work transformative for Spanish wine and Pingus the benchmark for the new Spain.
High praise indeed. What about other critics?
James Suckling is also a big fan. Consistently high 90s scores, calls it a terrific young red, a benchmark Spanish cult wine. Wine Enthusiast even gave the 2016 vintage 100 points.
So across the board, the top critics agree this is something truly special.
Absolutely. And it's not just scores, there's also recognition for the farming. We mentioned the biodynamics. Pingus often gets highlighted for its sustainable approach, even receiving the Robert Parker Green emblem.
Right, that holistic quality.
Yeah. So all this critical adoration, combined with the scarcity, naturally leads to it being one of Spain's highest priced and most sought-after wines. But the consensus among critics is clear. It genuinely lives up to the hype. Someone summed it up nicely. Pingus is one of the best wines in Spain, if not all of Europe.
Wow. Okay, so beyond the scores, the story, the price. What does it actually taste like? For someone listening who might never get to try it, what's the sensory experience?
Yeah, let's try to capture that. The tasting notes always talk about intense, complex smells and flavors. Full-bodied, yes, but with this cultivated, refined structure, and that signature balance power meets finesse.
Maybe walk us through a couple of key vintages.
Okay. The 95, the debut. Parker mentioned rich fruit, spice, depth, said it was one of the greatest and most exciting wines he'd tasted. Fast forward to the 2004, that first 100-pointer. Notes described an opaque purple-black color. Aromas just jumping out of the glass, things like Asian spices, incense, lavender, truffle, black cherry, blackberry. Dense, rich, seamless texture, built for the long haul.
Those aromas sound incredible. What about more recent examples? Give us a feel for the newer style, maybe.
Sure. The 2012, another perfect score, noted for transcendent balance, lush, dark fruit, but also mineral and floral notes coming through. The 2016, praised for precision and freshness even in a warm year, dark fruit, good acidity, those noble Tempranillo tannins giving a faint, pleasant bitterness.
And the 2018, the one described as subtle and elegant.
Exactly. Luis Gutierrez at the Wine Advocate called it subtle and harmonious, elegant and insinuating, precise and pure. James Suckling noted its perfumed nose and fine tannin structure. Even the 2020 reviews mentioned things like crushed stone, violets, sweet dark berries, a powerful yet layered palate. Wine Spectators talked about its harmony, tension, complexity, and quiet power.
So, are there common threads? Things you almost always find in Pingus?
Definitely. You usually get dark fruits, black cherry, blackberry, plum seem common, often complex layers of exotic spices, maybe some floral notes like violet. The texture is dense, concentrated, but the tannins are consistently described as very fine-grained, sweet, ripe. There's usually a mineral undertone, graphite, iron, stone, hints of cocoa, licorice, sometimes truffle as it ages, and crucially, good acidity provides lift and length.
And it ages well.
Oh, absolutely. It has fantastic aging potential, develops more nuance, more complexity over many years, even decades for the best vintages. And it's interesting, despite often being quite high in alcohol, maybe over 14%, it rarely tastes hot. It carries it with balance. The finish is usually described as very long, authoritative.
So it's more than just a collector's item. It really stands as a quality benchmark.
Without a doubt. It really did change the game for Spain's reputation at the highest level. It proved what was possible and continues to be a reference point year in, year out.
Okay, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's boil it down. What are the absolute key things our listeners should take away about Pingus?
I think it comes down to a few core things. First, Peter Sisseck's vision totally uncompromising on quality. Second, that exceptional terroir, the old vines, the specific spot in Ribera del Duero. Third, the incredibly meticulous farming, the biodynamics, and the minimalist approach in the winery. Fourth, the sheer scarcity, fewer than 500 cases most years. And finally, that consistent, almost unparalleled level of critical acclaim right from the very beginning. It's that combination that creates the legend.
It really is an amazing story, a perfect storm of factors creating something truly unique. And for everyone listening, we hope this dive gave you those key insights, those aha moments about Pingus without getting bogged down, a shortcut to really appreciating what makes it so special.
Absolutely. And maybe it leaves us with a final thought, something to chew on. You see this level of dedication, this combination of nature and meticulous human effort creating something like Pingus. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Wonder what?
What other things out there, maybe things that seem simple on the surface, might hold similar depths? Similar stories of passion, terroir, technique. If only we took the time to look a bit closer.
That's a great question. What else rewards that deeper dive? Something to ponder.